Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast brought to you by Joint Flows. Today we're joined by Chris Muir. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I said your surname correctly. I hope I did. I
Yeah,
thought
you
I'd
did.
usually ask before we hit records, and for some reason I didn't today.
No, that's good.
So
That's good.
hopefully I said it correctly. But Chris is a seasoned leader within the SaaS tech space, within sales and marketing. So if there's anything you don't know, the chances are Chris probably does know it. But we always like to start off with a bit of an introduction, Chris. So tell our listeners who you are
Yeah.
and what's brought you to here today.
So I've been around sales and marketing for almost 30 years now, which is quite scary to be honest. I originally worked in the electronics industry, selling things that go into bits of kit that we all know and use on a daily basis, but we don't really understand what's in them. So that was pretty interesting. About 10 years ago, made the switch into SaaS. Having been told by many people that I wouldn't be able to do it because software is this dark art that people don't understand. And as it transpired, hey, sales is sales, right? And if you're doing the right things, you're doing the right things. So I kind of like to do these types of activities because I think, well, I know that a lot of people, the vast majority of people stumbled into sales as a career. We didn't want to do it when we were kids. It wasn't the exciting thing that we thought we were going to be, and we ended up doing it because maybe there was nothing else, or we were presented with opportunity, or we realized that actually financially it can be quite rewarding. But because of that, there's a lack of development, enablement, skill teaching and coaching, and I think podcasts like this really help people to upskill themselves and learn from other people. So it's kind of why I'm here, basically.
Awesome. And just give our listeners a little bit of context. What, in terms of the businesses that you've been at, what
Yeah.
kind of deal cycles are we talking about? What durations are they? How complex are they typically, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, most of my SaaS career has been in what I would term as the mid-market space. So, from a revenue perspective, that would be companies probably in the 50 to $250 million range, but it can vary. I think with different businesses, I've worked in organizations where an average deal size might be 50, $60,000. I've worked in the same space where an average deal size might be $5,000 because of the product mix. One thing that's consistent in that space is deal cycles tend to be 9 months long, typically. Um, Maybe a little bit longer if it's an outbound motion rather than an inbound motion, but that kind of varies. So, and complexity, I mean, I think now most SaaS products, unless you can buy them over the internet, have some level of complexity, and we are constantly told that the number of stakeholders or the buying committee or the buying group that gets involved in a deal is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, the complexity is always there. It's usually it's always been a very defined process of managing a discovery, doing demos, going through all yes, the legal reviews, the security reviews, looking at integrations, all of that kind of stuff happens in all of the software that I've been involved in.
Yeah. I've got Nicholas that you were
Ah,
gonna.
it's my turn. As you know, one each.
I was so
Chris, I
keen.
um, so I think this is particularly true nowadays where there's an increasing level of competition as well, where AI is much more accessible. You can create products and software really quickly, so you tend to have a lot of competitors really quickly. Um, on the longer sales cycles, like call it with two or three stakeholders involved on the buying side, where do deals typically get stuck in the systems when you report on the pipeline that you're looking at?
I if you're talking about from an internal perspective from CRM, then they get stuck, I think, because we as sales leaders have struggled to make the process for sales people as easy as possible when it comes to updating information. And I in my last role, we re-implemented Salesforce, and it made the whole process more difficult for the sales team to, unfortunately, made the whole process more difficult for the sales team. So then there was a less likelihood that they would do it. And when I was looking into the CRM, then it became more difficult to see where things are. I think when you have a sales cycle of sort of 6, 9 months and multiple stakeholders, there's lots of places where deals can get stuck. And I think what tends to happen is, or the biggest issue that I've seen is how connected we are as a sales organization to the people, the key people in our prospect at more than one or two levels. So, you say three stakeholders. I think now if three would be a wonderful number, because actually it tends to be much more
Mm.
than that, and they tend to be cross-functional. So, but what I often see and what I've seen in lots of roles is you find a champion or a person or a rep finds a champion and they feel that that's the person they need to spend all their time with, rather than actually looking at, okay, who else is involved and who else from our business can we bring in to be involved with those people. So when things do get stuck, and they can get stuck for all sorts of reasons. Businesses change, people change, priorities change. And I'm finding that with my own current process in terms of trying to find a new role is that you can go through and because I treat it like a sales job, to be honest. You can go through a process with an organization and you get to a point where you think this is great, everything's moving really well, and then it stops because there's been an organizational change on the company side. So having that opportunity to understand more about what's happening in the business from more people, I think is absolutely crucial because that's where things get stuck.
Yeah, Chris, I think there's quite a bit that you've said there that we could unpack really. You started off with the CRM and redoing the CRM in your last org, made it, I guess, less appealing for the reps to actually populate the information. What you then find, or what I've seen at least, is your reps are still working somewhere, right? They're still managing these deals, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's often outside of your system of records, and that makes it very difficult, especially for you and you're a leader, trying to understand what's happening within that pipeline. How are you? What do you think is the best way to navigate that process?
Um, so I think at a top level, you need to try and fix the issues with CRM, which can be challenging if that's not owned and managed appropriately, which is what I've experienced recently. But that's a side issue, and we won't talk about the negativities of that. Um, I think so. I think you need to understand your salespeople and be connected with them, and if they are keeping things in spreadsheets or they're keeping things in their notes or they're keeping things in other places, you need to be able to find a way to get that information out. Now, ideally, you'd like to put it into a system, and there are tools that you can use. So I've found tools like Gong really effective because you can utilize that to really get information from calls, which can then feed into CRMs without a salesperson having to really do very much. Um, but really, just spending time with people. I've always believed that effective sales leaders, almost regardless of what level they get to, are most effective when they are as hands-on as they can possibly be based on the time that they have. So when you get to a CRO level, obviously you've got lots of other things going on in your life, but actually still making time to have a one-to-one with a sales rep on a monthly basis or even a you know bi-monthly basis is going to give you so much insight into what's happening in your business over looking at a system, basically.
And
Absolutely.
Chris, you mentioned, I think what you said around alignment. You said, oh, three people buying side is pretty easy, basically, to manage, and it would be great if it was only three people.
Yeah.
But you also said that you're doing man marking at multi-level in the org chart. Like, I'm assuming that the rep is looking after someone, and then the exec is doing exec, and then technical to technical. How do you create this motion? Like, how do you teach salespeople to proactively release a little bit of the control over the deal to other stakeholders?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Mick. Salespeople naturally like to keep everything to themselves and tell us what's happening when they've won the deal, basically. So I use I developed a strategy when I was at NetSuite, which I call win strategizing. And it's basically a template that sits on top of a sales process that looks at uh, I effectively call it account planning for. So if you think about what a key account director or manager would do with if they're in an account management space, they would intimately know their customers so that they could immediately spot any opportunities, whether that be for upsell, cross-sell, or or even looking for where things might go wrong or might be problematic in terms of retention and moving the business forward. What I try to do with the one strategizing idea is to apply some of that methodology. So say, okay, well, we're going into a new business environment. We need to understand this business really closely. We need to understand what it is they do, why they do it, what they want to do, who on their side is really important, and then map all of that out on a template that says, okay, we've got these key stakeholders. Who are we going to introduce from our side to be the person that works with them? And it may be that in a lot of cases for me personally, when I did this, especially at NetSuite, it all it was an introduction. So I would get an introduction from my rep to the CFO, let's say, and I might have a very brief conversation, or I might sit in a demo and meet the CFO. But that having that connection allowed me, if something wasn't moving, to pick up the phone and phone that CFO and say, "Hey, you remember we spoke? How's things going? What's happening? Are we doing everything we should be doing? Is there anything?" And it just opened up a different avenue of conversation. Uh, Equally, and you talk about technical to technical alignment, technical people within the sales organization, often from a customer side, are not seen as salespeople. So people tend to be more open with them
Mm.
in terms of conversation. So I could have a solution consultant talk to someone on the customer side or the prospect side and get much more information than a salesperson might ever be able to get from their key contact. So I think just to I guess to finally answer your question, how do you get that? How do you get salespeople to do that? I think what you need to do in any way that you're trying to get people to do something that's a little bit outside their comfort zone or something that's new to them, you just have to show them why it's good for them. If you show people why something is good for them, they'll do it. If you don't, they probably won't.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. My old CEO, Waleed, from when I was at Yieldify, used to say the same thing to me. He used to say, if you just bring out the person in the white lab coat, they're going to listen more than if you say, even if you know it. So
Yeah.
always match them up. So absolutely couldn't agree more. Um, but what do you do when that deal gets stuck? So with all the best will in the world, you align these stakeholders, you're having your conversations with your reps, you're trying to make sure you know everything that's happening in a deal. But, you know, invariably deals are never closing when they're supposed to. So you look at your CRM, it's always on the last day of the month or the quarter, miraculously. And we're getting a huge portion of deals that are slipping month to month, quarter to quarter. So how are you understanding as a leader why that's happening and where these recurring themes are?
Yeah, I think you've got to use tools to try and make sure that you're, as an organization, understanding where the prospect is. So we've used and I've used closed plans or whatever you want to call them, mutual engagement plans, also project plans, whatever you want to call them, to really try and understand what's happening on the buyer side of this project that might impact it. And we've all seen the situations where a deal slips because someone went on holiday that we didn't know about, and everyone pulls their hair out going, "Oh, we should have known about that. That's just an easy thing. We should have asked that question." But so I think it all comes back to what you do in terms of the closeness you have with the buying side, understanding what's happening from their perspective, trying to understand if there's any priorities that they might have that might shift things, looking for red flags. I mean, a classic one that I've seen so often, which reps quite often don't spot, is they hear that the company's acquisitive and then they go quiet and they wonder why, and then they find out actually they're trying to acquire a business. And anyone that's been through an acquisition knows that that takes every ounce of energy that a business has. So it's no wonder that this project has slipped. So you can look at, there's certain things that you can look at within an engagement and try and spot. If you have aligned yourself correctly and appropriately with the buying side committee, then you can use other people in your organization to try and find out what's going on. So I might phone a CFO. I could have my CRO phone the CEO or whatever, just because we've had that introduction. But I think we've all got to accept that we don't always get this right, because it's not easy, because we are reliant on other people telling us what's happening. Sometimes they don't tell us because they don't want to. Sometimes they don't tell us because they can't, and sometimes they lie to us, right? I mean, it's just because they've got their own motivations and interests. Um, so I think the other thing you have to be, and one of the things, whenever I've been asked what do I look for in a good salesperson, one of the things I say is pessimism, because I think you need people in your organization that when they look at their own deals, they are pessimistic about them, which is almost the opposite of what salespeople are naturally. So it's
Yeah.
quite an interesting dynamic.
There's a book from I think the founder of IBM called Only the Paranoids Survive or something
Mm,
like that. And
yeah.
I'm yet to read it, but the title is title is
Yeah.
spot on.
But I think it's a healthy paranoia, right? It's because the other thing that I look for in salespeople, really good salespeople, is curiosity, and those two things are aligned. If you're curious and paranoid, you're curious because you want to find out more, and that helps helps impact your paranoia. So the more information you have, I used to have a mantra at NetSuite, and I had it on the top of a whiteboard in my office, which said "No surprises." Now, it's impossible in the vast majority of deals to not be surprised by something. Sometimes it might be a good thing, sometimes a bad thing, but the more you can minimize the number of surprises that happen in a deal cycle, the better you're going to forecast it, and the more chance you're going to have of winning the deal.
Yeah. I was so it sounds like, Chris, you've got your system of records, your CRM, which you rightly said that is, there's a lot of gaps that you need to then um plug. And I think you've got some layer of account planning on top of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I've got two questions. Can you explain to us, if it's not the secret sauce, can you explain to us what this looks like, the account plan? And then the second question I have is, I'm guessing that the account plan is an internal document that sits on top of the system of records. How do you keep the buying side involved and engaged and on track with what they need to deliver?
So it's not secret sauce. I actually have written a short book about it, and it is available on Amazon. So there's my plug. So thank you guys.
There you go. What's the name? What's the
It's
name
called
of the book?
it's called a winning strategy. So it's available. And it's a really simple technique. As with any of these things, and I've talked about closed plans, as I call them, and some people don't like the name because they think it's too salesy. But anyway, let's call it closed plans. The format and the template doesn't really matter. What's important is the information, right? What's important is what you get out of it. So I have, and in the book I do share a very basic table format that says, okay, what do we understand about the business? What is our strategy around how we're going to demo, how we're going to present value, how we're going to talk about, um, in my world, the implementation of the software, what's our negotiation strategy, what's our marketing strategy, which to me is key because lots of people think marketing stops when you engage with someone. I think that's when it really starts, right? The marketing up to the point where you engage with someone is a very different kind of marketing to the marketing you do when you're actually talking to them. And that's when you can get really clever and personalized and focused and try and use it to bridge some of those gaps that you might have. So it's really just a so all of that, and then that same information looked at from a stakeholder perspective. So if we've got these three, five, seven people that we're aware of, how does all of that apply to them? So in a demo environment, for example, what the CEO wants to see might be entirely different from what the operations manager wants to see. We need to understand that. And the same very clearly goes for how you present value. What's value to a CEO is very different to what's
Mm.
value to a financial controller, for example. And I've got loads of examples of how that's um, bit my team in the backside when I was at NetSuite, because we thought we were presenting value, but actually we weren't in the right way. So it's all available. It's all there. It's what I try to do, and what I've tried to do in businesses since I started using this is make it as integrated into the software solutions as we possibly use. So that might be putting in a playbook in CRM, right? So Salesforce, HubSpot all have a playbook capability. So it's really how do we make it again as easy as possible for the salespeople to do it? What's what's absolutely crucial about that process is it's not just about sales. So when the salesperson puts that template together at an initial stage, the first question we're asking is, can we win the deal? And that's a collaborative effort between everyone that's involved in that sale. So it will be the salesperson, the technical salesperson, the managers if it needs escalating, and if there's any disagreement, it's an open forum to discuss. But what I want to come out of that first, can we win this deal, is absolute agreement as to how we're going to move forward. And if you have that, then that can start to impact what you're doing on the buying side. So then you can say, okay, we're clear about how we think we're going to win this deal. How do we now present that to the buying side so that we get them to buy into it? And then I think you start introducing tools like a close plan, and that's very much a collaborative document between us as sellers and the buyers. And again, how you introduce that is probably key. I think in my career, I've had less than 5 prospects come to me with their own project plan, which is absolute gold dust, right? Because they've thought about it and they're clear about how they do it. But I think if you introduce that in the right way, as look, you're embarking on this project, which is to identify and buy and implement a software solution that's going to change your business. Don't think the project starts when you've actually chosen the software. The project starts when you think about actually wanting to do it. So you're going to have a project plan that says we bought this software, how are we going to implement it? You really should have a project plan that says we want to do this, how are we going to choose it? And make it as mutual a document as possible. In a lot of cases, I've actually said to prospects when I've been brought into deals to talk about this is, look, if my competitors are not doing this, use my template and get them to do it, because you should be doing this with everyone you're talking about. And it removes the stigma of it being a sales tool if I give them that opportunity to do that. But it benefits me because if they're doing it with everyone, then we're all getting the information we need, right? So it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. You used an interesting term there, which I'm a big fan of, which is project plan. The notion that salespeople are project managers now, effectively, is something that, I believe in a massive way. Where do you stand on the art versus the science when it comes to selling? Like, how much is it the gift of the gab versus how much is it, let me orchestrate, let me understand who needs to do what when?
I yeah, I think it varies, to be honest. I think it very much varies on the individual and the person. Um, I was an okay salesperson. I was probably more on the science side than the art. But I've had people work for me that are completely on the art side. And I think what we do as or what we try to do as effective leaders is, or what I certainly try to do is identify and understand that you're going to have different people on your team that manage in different ways and do different things and need support in different ways. Give them the framework basis to do it, and then just give them the freedom to go and do what works for them. I think now though, and I would definitely agree that in most of the businesses that I've worked in over the last 10 years, it really is important that a salesperson has a skill set that allows them to manage all of the complexities of what's going on in their deal, whether that's internal or external. And even if it is just managing diaries to get 12, 13, sometimes 15 people together in a room, maybe on a Zoom call or a Teams call, it still takes quite a lot of capability. But yeah, so I think it's a mix, and different people have different skill sets.
And if you were to build a team from scratch today, like, would you prioritize the art or the science?
Again, I'd like a mix. I think a good team has a mix. My team, my kind of I had 3 teams at NetSuite when I left. The one team that I managed myself into that were managed by managers reporting into me. The team I had myself had an amazing mix of different personalities, different skill sets, different outlooks, different motivations. I think diversity is really important in a sales team. I think sales is a team sport. I don't think it's an individual sport, and which some people find a bit strange because everyone carries their own number. But like you have to learn off other people, and I have had people working for me that are complete mavericks, um, but really needed the support of the people who understood the systems and understood how to do things. You know, they might be the ones that pulled in these amazing deals from nowhere, but they didn't know how to process them in the system, so they needed someone to help them with that. And
Yeah.
I think you really have to have that mix.
Do you team like would you say that you would team them up on a single call, like someone very hard driven, someone more silent?
No, not unless not unless it was somebody new coming into the team that I felt needed some support and experience. I think it's just I think what I've experienced is that people naturally gravitate to each other based on what their needs are. But what I would make sure is when we had team meetings or forecast calls or other opportunities that they could bounce things off each other. You know, for me, a forecast call is not about me understanding what the forecast is because I should know that, right? I should know that on a day-to-day basis. I don't need a call on a Friday afternoon to tell me what the numbers are. If I need that, then I'm kind of in trouble. The forecast
Yeah.
call is for everyone else in the team to talk about what's going on so they can share things with each other and try and spot things that might be common amongst deals. So you know, there might be times you do that, but I don't think that would be a sort of standard position I would take.
Yeah. You know, you talk about the forecasting call, and different orgs work in different ways. You know, some people have it 2 times a week, one
Yeah.
focusing on deal reviews, one focusing on numbers, etc. But I'm aligned with you in the sense that, you know, when I've been leading sales teams, that if I don't know what the forecast is, then something's gone awry over here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my my question to you would be when you look at your CRM, so with everything that we've discussed up until now, you look at your CRM because that's your single source of truth. What indicators are you looking for within that pipeline report to say that's a good deal, that's not a good deal, and ultimately this is a number I think we're going to land on?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at, I mean, there's the obvious things that will determine whether the deal is the right, whether the information is right, and whether there's, you know, whether the process has been followed. But when you're getting to the point of forecasting something, especially committing something, you're looking for things like, you know, when was the last activity? When was the last conversation? You know, have we been engaged with this person? Are we or this company or these people? You know, what movement has there been? Where are we at in a stage? So, you know, classic things like if you've got a fairly simple opportunity process, opportunity stage that might be discovery, demo, I don't know, whatever, follow up, negotiation, blah, blah, blah. If you've got somebody forecasting something for commit for this month, but it's still at discovery stage, then that's a massive red flag, right? So, and I think using tools like again, Gong's really good at sort of spotting those things and saying, actually, you've got these deals that look like they're stuck. Should you really be forecasting them? So from a CRM perspective, that would be what I would look at. You've got to factor in that you've got to be then understanding whether your reps are doing the right thing in terms of pushing stuff forward, right? So I think then if you have a good CRM system and you design it properly, you should be flagging to them in an automated way things that don't look right. So that might be a set of reminders on a dashboard that says you've got these 5 deals that haven't been touched in for the last 7 days that you think are closing this month. What's happening? And just using that as a way and a method of keeping those things front and center. I would, you know, for all that the forecast call would be not necessarily for me, but I'd be part of it and be interested in it. Uh, For direct reports, I'd be having a one-to-one every week, and that would be really focused, at least part of it, on what deals are you thinking you're going to close this month? Where are they at? What's happening with them? How does that align with what's in CRM? What can I trust? What can I not trust? So it's a combination of CRM because, okay, yes, it should be a single source of truth, but quite often it's not with the personalized motion with the sales team.
I've got a little bit of a controversial stance on forecasting. um, where I I
Controversy is
don't
good, but it's okay.
I don't believe reps should forecast their deals. I think it's a lot of lip service you're getting, and they're very. I mean, that's their lives, right? So if those deals don't come in, then their job is at risk, and there's a whole set of factors that would incentivize them to give you the number that they feel they need as opposed to the real number. And join flows cut through that bullshit. Basically, we don't ask anyone to forecast. We look at the deal complexity, all the red flags, what's going well, what's not, and then whether it's actually doable to land within a specific fiscal period. But I know that the traditional way is to say, okay, every week we look at the pipeline, you forecast the pipeline, and then you attribute each deal confidence level. So like,
Yeah.
it's classic commit, best case, upside. At leadership level, and given your experience, Chris, like how much do you take from the actual number that you're being given by a rep?
Um, so I think to some extent I agree with you, Mike. I do think that forecasting is, in some cases, in a lot of cases, quite a futile exercise. Not because I don't think the reps are honest or that they don't want to give you what they think is the right number. I just think there's so many variables that I think are that are challenging. I mean, you talk about probability. What does probability actually mean, right? A deal is either going to close or it's not closed. So why would I put 70%? Because what does that mean? I'm not going to close 70% of the deal. I'm either going to close the deal or I'm not going to close the deal. So but I do think that one of the things I think is useful about forecasting is accountability. So I think it puts accountability on salespeople to actually take ownership of what they've got to do. Um, I would probably say that on average, I would be somewhere between 50 and 70% of what I get as a forecast is what I would forecast. But I would try and use some intelligence around that. And I think this is where a lot of CRM systems really fall down, and I've often had to do this outside of CRM, is I want to know historically what my forecast accuracy has been. I want to know what my reps forecast accuracy has been. So if I've got a rep that's saying I'm going to deliver this number, I can say, well, historically you usually over forecast by this amount. So I can automatically say I'm going to cut that down. And so there's a little bit of science to it, and there's obviously a gut feel as well. But yeah, somewhere
Yeah.
between 50 and 70%.
Yeah, I think I would have done 50% as well. I'm more on the conservative side. But sometimes I would have done 30, and
Yeah.
sometimes there were times, and especially the closer we get to the end of the quarter, where I don't take any forecast at all. Like I just feel like it's just asking for the stick, basically. But I agree. Like, I'm always, I don't really understand forecasting, I must admit, because you look at the deal, is the date the forecast? Is the probability the forecast? Is the confidence level the forecast?
Yeah.
If it's all three, like which one's got the
Yeah,
higher
yeah, yeah.
weight?
Yeah, my personal opinion is that I've always made the date the principle.
Yeah, I agree
That's
with
the
that.
most important thing. If we get the date right, whether we win or lose it, that's fine. Then we can look at the other stuff. So focus on the date and then work backwards from there. So
Nice.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, time flies when you're having fun because believe it or not, we've already reached the closing portion of the podcast. So we do have a little bit of a tradition, which is the last guest who is on the podcast has left a question. Well, actually, this particular guest has left two questions
Oh, okay.
for you to answer. And then after that, we'll ask you to leave a question for our next guest as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you both of the questions because one of them is slightly humorous, and you can answer them in whichever order you want to. So the questions are: question one is why do men have nipples? And question two is what's the one rule that you have learnt to make a successful sale?
So the answer to the first question is I have no idea. So there you go.
It's a good question.
That's a very good question. I have no idea. I know some people that will probably, if they ever see this podcast, will give me dog's abuse for not knowing that because they think I should know stuff like that. But no, I don't know. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I will ask. I'll ask Google. I might ask Google later on, although I'm slightly concerned that I might get some really strange results back from Google. But the second question, Hitesh, was what? Sorry again.
The second question was, what's the one rule that you have learned to make a successful sale?
I would one rule. One rule is quite hard. That's a really good question to answer. I think. I think. Um, think it goes back to what I said about the what makes a good salesperson, and I think the rule is be curious, be pessimistic, be open, and actively listen to everything that's happening within your deal cycle, and that means using your ears, but also means using your eyes, right? I mean, when I say listen, I mean listen to the environment as well, um, because that way you will have much better understanding what's happening in the deal. And one final thing I would say is, and it goes back to the what I talk about from a win strategy perspective, be entirely honest with yourself about whether you think you can win the deal. There's absolutely no point chasing after something that you're not never going to win just because you need to fill pipeline or you've got a number to deliver.
Absolutely. Love that. There's nothing worse than when I see a rep wasting time in a deal. That's never going to happen. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show,
Absolutely.
and I've taken away quite a bit from it as well. So thank you so much to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in. This has been the Revenue Revolution podcast brought to you by Joint Flows. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.